Good morning. This morning, we celebrate the very first Sunday of the church year. I know, it's a bit strange. The Julian calendar ends at the end of December. The church calendar does not. The church calendar ends after the last Sunday of Pentecost, or I should say the season after Pentecost, because Pentecost is a one-day festival. But the church year begins in Advent. And so we have 4 Sundays before Christmas. And these are the 4 Sundays when we are reminded that we always need to be awake. Not literally physically awake. Jesus is not saying we can never go to sleep at night. That's not his point. What his point is that we cannot afford to lose our vigilance. And what does that mean? It's a fair question. And why do we only remember that we have to be constantly vigilant for 4 weeks out of the entire year? 4 weeks out of 52, we remember this. Well, in truth, there's a lot of good things that Jesus says, and we also want to look at those, and we also want to think about those. And if you look at it this way, Jesus told us the way we need to live our lives, to love ourselves, to love our neighbors, to love God. And that is confusing and confounding. And even when we try our best, we still fail. Sometimes we fail very privately and kind of secretly, and nobody notices. And sometimes we fail very publicly. It's a very public failure. Everybody takes note and everybody remembers. But regardless of that, regardless of how spectacularly or how quietly we fail to love our neighbors as ourselves, there's still the next moment, and the next hour, and the next day, and the next week that we get to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and take a deep breath before we try again. And it strikes me that these 4 weeks of Advent, when the theme is stay awake, constant vigilance, Christ is coming, be prepared, the kind of preparation that I think Jesus wants us to do isn't quite the same way we prepare for a snowstorm, or we prepare for a hurricane, or we prepare for having a new baby in the household, or we prepare for moving households. It's not quite the same thing. It's not quite the same level of preparation and vigilance, and it's not even quite the same thing as how we prepare for the Christmas holidays. When Jesus says to keep awake and prepare and stay vigilant, it strikes me that he's referencing his core message. Keep awake. Stay vigilant for those opportunities you have to practice love. Open your eyes to those opportunities that surround you on every side all the time to practice love. Now, I hear you saying, but it's a pandemic. I don't go anywhere. I don't see anyone. How can I love my neighbor when I'm stuck in my house? That's a fair point. That's a good point. But we think all the time. We do. And before the pandemic, it was a favorite thought experiment of mine to say, you can love your neighbor as yourself. You can figure out how to do it even if you just sit at home and meet no one, even if you are a hermit, even if you are a cloistered nun, even if you decide that you can't actually deal with people and the nicest thing you can do for the world is just not talk to anybody anymore, you can still, where you are, practice loving yourself and loving your neighbor, and therefore loving God. Because each one of us, we continue to think our thoughts. Now let's pause and consider this for a moment. Unless you are a master of meditation, and by master, I mean you've been mastering it for some number of decades. Unless you are a master of meditation, your thoughts just happen without your control. They just go on in the background, so much so you might not even notice them until you really need to have some mental quiet, and then you realize, I can't make myself stop thinking. I can't make it happen. It's the mental chatter that constantly goes on in our minds. And, that mental chatter is filled with lots and lots of things. Lots and lots of things. Old thoughts, old memories, your to-do list, the things you need to do in the future, fears about the past, hopes about the future, anxiety, all kinds of things. And also, our thoughts are also filled with all kinds of commentary about other people. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a terrible person. It doesn't make you a misogynist or a racist or anything like that to have negative thoughts about people. It actually makes you human. And what we usually say is, it's what you do with your thoughts. It's how you act. It's what you say. But here's a tip. If you are stuck in the pandemic, largely alone, and you think to yourself, well, I don't have to worry about loving my neighbor as myself because I don't have to deal with them right now. I can take a vacation from that until the vaccine is widely available. Well, I mean, you could, but it's not recommended. Because now could be the time for you to make inroads with your thoughts about people. Now, key in loving yourself and loving your neighbor and thus loving God is that you still have to love yourself. So it's not a good thing to start looking at your thoughts and start examining your thoughts. And maybe start a course of meditation. And then start beating yourself up for all of the thoughts that you think. That's not the point. The point is to be able to start to gently and kindly look at all of your thoughts, whether you consider them good or bad, whether you consider them kind or cruel, to start looking at your thoughts and gently sort out the thoughts you no longer wish to think. Now, that may seem like dreaming the impossible dream, but it is possible. It is possible. And it's one of the ways we can love our neighbors and love ourselves. And when Jesus says, have constant vigilance, I think what he's talking about is be constantly vigilant for the love that you can have and the love that you can give and the love that you can feel toward yourself and all those around you. And that is a tough sell. because it has implications for our behavior. And that is always a tough sell. But I think that that is at the core of the spiritual point of Advent. It's preparing for the first coming. It's remembering about the first coming of Christ as a little baby in Bethlehem. So sweet. There's a star, there's angels. It's wonderful. And also preparing for his second coming. And while some believe that that will be an apocalypse worthy of Hollywood, others, and I'm among them, believe that it will come in a different way. And that it will be all about loving our neighbors as ourselves. So, Jesus is coming. Look busy. Amen.